Visual Viking longships sailing through fog, stormy seas, fierce warriors. They were rulers of the seas, warriors and explorers. But were Vikings just raiders or something more? Welcome to my channel. And today, let's find out. Were Vikings just raiders? What was life really like back then? Where did they come from? Why are they famous for their raids and battles? How did they build an empire? Let's take a quick journey back in time to the cold and foggy lands of Scandinavia. Specifically, we're heading to Norway, Sweden, and Denmark during the 8th century. This is where our story begins. At this time, these regions were known as the Viking Way, a loose collection of tribes and communities bound together by a common language, culture, and, well, a love for all things adventurous. The word Viking itself comes from the Old Norse word Viking, which means pirate or raider. So right off the bat, we know these folks weren't exactly known for their peace-loving ways. But before we paint them as one-dimensional brutes, it's important to remember that, like any group of people, the Vikings were a diverse bunch. Sure, they had their fair share of troublemakers, but they also had farmers, blacksmiths, traders, and even explorers. They were a mix of pagans and Christians. And their society, while rooted in tradition, wasn't completely stuck in the past. Their way of life revolved around three key elements: raids, seafaring, and war. These were the Vikings, the fierce warriors of the North. Now, when you hear the word Viking, what comes to mind? Brutal raids, pillaging, and plundering. Oh well, you're not entirely wrong. But there's more to the Viking story than just their raiding culture. The Viking Age, roughly spanning from the 8th to 11th centuries, saw these intrepid explorers venturing far and wide, driven by a thirst for adventure, new trade routes, and, let's face it, a little bit of mischief. Their longships were their ticket to the world, enabling them to navigate both the vast oceans and the murky rivers deep into Europe's heartland. These ships were marvels of design, combining speed, flexibility, and durability. Were like the sports cars of the sea, perfect for those lightning-fast raids. Imagine this. You're a resident of a coastal town in 8th century England. It's a peaceful day until suddenly, out of the corner of your eye, you spot a fleet of menacing longships cutting through the waves. Before you can sound the alarm, a horde of fierce Vikings has landed, and they're here to plunder your town. Yes, those dreaded Viking raids were a real thing. Monasteries, towns, and villages across England, France, and Ireland knew the wrath of the Vikings. In 793 AD, the Viking attack on Lindisfarne is seen as the event that kicked off the Viking Age. These relentless warriors didn't hold back. Their tactics were brutal, their attacks swift, and their demands for treasure were relentless. But don't think they only attacked defenseless civilians. Vikings were fierce fighters who loved a good battle. They raided and fought with other European kingdoms too. They were known for their skill in battle and their tenacity in the face of danger. Now let's talk about their weapons of choice. When you picture a Viking, you probably imagine someone swinging a hefty battle axe or sword with a shield in the other hand. You're pretty close to the mark. Vikings favored axes, swords, and round shields in combat. But here's a fun fact. They didn't just rely on brute strength. Many Vikings were trained athletes who competed in sports like wrestling, running, and horse racing. In fact, some historians believe that the Olympics got their start from the Vikings' love of athletic competitions. Okay, so we've established that Vikings were warriors and raiders, but here's a twist. Many of them were also farmers and craftsmen. Life as a Viking wasn't all about pillaging and plundering. In fact, most Vikings had a pretty ordinary existence. They farmed the land, raised livestock, and traded their goods in local markets. They also had skilled craftsmen among them, creating everything from intricate jewelry to sturdy tools and weapons. But let's not forget about the sea. For the Vikings, the ocean wasn't just a means to raid distant lands, it was also a source of food and a highway to trade. Fishing was a vital part of their diet. They developed advanced boats and navigation techniques to help them explore and exploit the rich fishing grounds of the North Sea. As for women, well, they had more rights than many of their counterparts in medieval Europe. Viking women could own property, make contracts, and even divorce their husbands. They also participated in religious rituals, managed households, and sometimes even went on raids. Now, don't get me wrong, they weren't treated as equals, but they definitely had it better than most. Now that we've covered some basics, let's dive into the fascinating world of Viking beliefs. Religion played a central role in the lives of the Vikings, shaping their values, rituals, and even their view of the afterlife. They were polytheistic, meaning they believed in multiple gods, and their pantheon was a colorful bunch. From the wise Odin, the god of wisdom and knowledge, to the mighty Thor, the god of thunder. Each deity had their own unique set of powers and domains. Let's not forget Loki, the trickster god, or Freya, the goddess of love and beauty. Now, if you've ever heard about Valhalla, the majestic hall where fallen warriors feast and fight, then you already know that the Vikings believed in an afterlife. In fact, they had quite a detailed belief system surrounding death and the underworld. According to their beliefs, when a warrior died in battle, they were immediately taken to Valhalla by the Valkyries, female figures who decided who lived or died in battle. There, the warriors spent their days feasting, fighting, and having a grand old time, preparing themselves for the final battle at Ragnarok, where good and evil would clash one last time. So if you died valiantly in battle, being a Viking must have seemed like a pretty sweet gig. Okay, so you might be thinking, wow, the Vikings sure had a colorful mythology. How did that influence the world? Well, more than you might think. Their stories served as the foundation for later tales of heroes and monsters. And let's not forget about the impact on art, literature, and even modern-day pop culture. Movies like Thor and TV series like Vikings have brought the Norse gods and sagas to a whole new audience. But it's not just entertainment. The Vikings' rich mythology has inspired countless books, video games, and works of art. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about the Vikings' spirit of exploration. These guys weren't just raiders and warriors. They were also some of the first Europeans to explore the vast ocean beyond their shores. In fact, they reached Iceland, Greenland, and even North America about 500 years before Christopher Columbus. One of the most famous Viking explorers was Leif Erikson, who according to legend landed in Vinland, now believed to be part of modern-day Canada. Of course, not every Viking was an eager explorer, but those who ventured out into the unknown returned with tales of new lands, new cultures, and new opportunities. This spirit of discovery led to the establishment of trading posts, settlements, and diplomatic missions across Europe and beyond. Now let's fast forward a bit to the 11th century when the Viking Age was drawing to a close. By this point, many Vikings had settled down, built permanent homes, and even converted to Christianity. The old way of life, the raids and pillaging, was fading into history. Instead, kingdoms began to emerge in Scandinavia, laying the groundwork for the modern nations of Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. And as for the rest of Europe, well, the Viking threat had diminished, leaving behind a legacy of both fear and admiration. So do you remember at the beginning when we asked whether Vikings were just raiders? It's time to circle back. As we wrap up our journey through the world of the Vikings, consider this. Were they just brutal warriors who lived for pillaging and plundering? Well, that depends on how you look at it. If you focus on their raids and battles, sure, they were fierce and unrelenting. But if you zoom out a bit and take a broader perspective, you'll see that they were also explorers, traders, and even farmers. They founded settlements, built kingdoms, and left an indelible mark on European history. So were the Vikings just raiders? Not if you ask me. They were the pioneers of the North, the adventurers who dared to explore the unknown. They were the Vikings, and their story is a reminder that history is rarely black and white. It's a tapestry woven with threads of exploration, war, culture, and humanity. Before we go, let's take a moment to appreciate the lasting impact of the Vikings. Their language, for instance, Old Norse gave us words like sky, knife, and even Thursday. Their mythology continues to capture our imaginations, and their stories have inspired generations of writers, artists, and filmmakers. Plus, their DNA lives on in parts of Europe, a tangible reminder of their once thriving presence. The Vikings may be long gone, but their legacy is as enduring as the icy landscapes from which they hailed. So what do you think? Do we paint a different picture of the Vikings than you might have imagined? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more journeys through time. Thanks for joining us today. Catch you next time.